how one vegan meal broke our marriage and put my fiancé in jail. Hey Reddit, buckle up, because this is a wild one. I need to get this off my chest, and honestly, I can't believe how things spiraled so badly. Let me set the stage for you with some background. So, my 30M ex-fiancée, Samantha, 29F, and I met about 5 years ago at a mutual friend's party. It was one of those opposites attract kind of stories. She was the loud, vibrant type who could work a room without breaking a sweat, while I was the guy nursing a drink in the corner, hoping no one would make me dance. Somehow, she spotted me, we struck up a conversation, and the rest is history. At first, things were great. Samantha had this magnetic energy that drew me in. She was an event planner and always seemed to know how to make life exciting. I was going through a rough patch when we met. Work stress, family drama, you name it. And she was a rock for me. She'd surprise me with little date nights, encourage me when I doubted myself, and honestly, I thought I'd hit the jackpot. But here's the thing. Samantha had this quirk. She absolutely hated vegan and vegetarian food. Like it wasn't just a preference. She genuinely believed the entire concept of veganism was some kind of propaganda. She'd roll her eyes at anyone who ordered plant-based dishes at restaurants, crack jokes about how they were missing out on real food, and go on long rants about how the vegan movement was a scam. At first, I didn't think much of it. Everyone's entitled to their opinion, right? But then, her disdain started getting personal. My cousin, Liam, 26M, is vegan due to some severe allergies. He can't eat certain animal products because they trigger a condition called eosinophilic esophagitis, EOE. If he consumes the wrong thing, it can cause his throat to swell and lead to long-term complications. Naturally, his diet isn't just a lifestyle choice, it's literally life or death. Samantha knew this, but she never seemed to take it seriously. She'd make snide comments whenever Liam was around like, "Oh look, here comes Mr. Grass Eater," or "Careful Liam, don't breathe near my steak, it might offend you." Liam, being the chill guy he is, usually brushed it off with a laugh, but I could see it bothered him. I tried to talk to Samantha about it a few times. One time, after a particularly nasty remark she made at a family barbecue, I pulled her aside and said, "Look, I get that you're not into the whole vegan thing, but Liam's diet isn't a choice. He has a medical condition, and it's not fair to make fun of him for that." She rolled her eyes and said, "Oh, come on, David. He needs to toughen up. People like him are the reason everyone's so sensitive these days." That turned into our first big fight. I told her she was being cruel and disrespectful, and she accused me of taking sides against her. Things got heated, and she ended up storming off, saying, "If you're so worried about Liam's feelings, maybe you should marry him instead." We didn't talk for 2 days after that. Eventually, we patched things up, but the issue never really went away. Over the years, her attitude towards vegans, and Liam specifically, kept causing friction between us. Another time, we were out at a nice restaurant with friends, and one of them ordered a vegan dish. Samantha made this exaggerated gagging noise and said, "Why even bother coming here if you're just going to eat rabbit food?" I was mortified. Later that night, I told her she'd embarrassed me and made our friends uncomfortable. She brushed it off, saying, "If they can't handle a joke, that's their problem." It felt like we were having the same argument over and over. I kept telling her to be more considerate, and she kept insisting that people needed to toughen up and stop being so sensitive. Eventually, I just gave up. I told myself it wasn't worth the constant fights, and I figured I could live with this one flaw since everything else about her seemed so perfect. I realize now how stupid that was. Fast forward to the months leading up to our wedding. Planning the wedding was stressful, but Samantha was in her element. She'd been dreaming about this day since she was a kid, and she wanted everything to be perfect. I tried to stay out of her way and let her do her thing, but there was one sticking point: Liam's dietary restrictions. Liam had politely asked if there could be a vegan option at the wedding, and Samantha agreed, or so I thought. She smiled and told him, "Of course, I'll make sure there's something special just for you." I was relieved because it seemed like she was finally making an effort to be considerate. Little did I know Samantha had other plans. Looking back, there were red flags I ignored. She made a few offhand comments during the planning, like, "I can't believe I have to cater to Liam's ridiculous needs on my big day," and, "Ugh, this is going to cost us extra just to make him happy." I chalked it up to wedding stress and didn't think much of it. I should have paid more attention. All right, Reddit, Here's where the fairy tale wedding started unraveling like a bad soap opera. The wedding day kicked off beautifully. Samantha had outdone herself with the planning. The venue was this gorgeous vineyard with an open-air ceremony space surrounded by rolling hills and grapevines. The weather was perfect, clear skies, a soft breeze, and just warm enough that no one was sweating in their formal wear. Guests were buzzing with excitement, and the air felt electric. The morning started with laughter and joy. Samantha and her bridesmaids were getting ready in one suite while I hung out with my groomsmen in another. Her closest friends, her sister and her mom, were all there, sipping mimosas and taking endless selfies. Meanwhile, my buddies and I shared some beers, reminisced about old times, and joked about how I was finally getting tied down. The celebrations leading up to the main ceremony had gone off without a hitch. There'd been a welcome dinner the night before, complete with toasts, embarrassing childhood stories, and a lot of laughter. Samantha and I had danced together under twinkling string lights, surrounded by our friends and family. Even Liam seemed to be enjoying himself, despite Samantha's usual jabs. On the wedding day itself, there were little events planned before the ceremony, games for the kids, a photo booth, and even a small dance-off that got everyone laughing. Samantha looked radiant in her dress, glowing with happiness, and I couldn't take my eyes off her. For once, she wasn't making any snide remarks or rolling her eyes. She was just genuinely happy. And then came the vows. Samantha and I were standing at the altar, surrounded by our loved ones. The officiant was walking us through the ceremony, and everything felt surreal. I could see my parents smiling at me, Samantha's mom tearing up, and my friends grinning like idiots. Liam was sitting in the second row with his parents, looking a little pale but otherwise fine. Or so I thought. Halfway through my vows, I noticed Liam shifting uncomfortably in his seat. He leaned over to whisper something to his mom, who glanced at him with concern. I paused for a moment, my words trailing off, and looked over. Liam gave me a weak smile and a thumbs up as if to say, "Don't worry about me, keep going." Samantha, on the other hand, was clearly annoyed. She let out a quiet sigh, just loud enough for me to hear, and muttered, "Can we not make this about him for once?" I shot her a look but decided to focus on finishing my vows. The officiant turned to Samantha and she began her vows with a bright smile. But as she spoke, Liam's condition seemed to worsen. He clutched his stomach, his breathing became shallow, and he started sweating profusely. This time, his mom didn't stay quiet. She leaned forward, whispering frantically to Liam, asking if he was okay. His dad got up, crouching next to him, and soon other family members were crowding around, asking what was going on. Samantha was visibly irritated now. She glanced at the group and said through gritted teeth, "Can't this wait? We're in the middle of something important here." Liam, despite clearly being in distress, waved them off weakly and said, "I'm fine, really. It's just a little stomach thing. Go on." I was torn. Part of me wanted to stop the ceremony and make sure he was okay. But Samantha was giving me this look, the kind that said, "If you stop this wedding for him, we're going to have a problem." So, reluctantly, I let it go. We returned to the altar, but just as Samantha was about to finish her vows, Liam stood up suddenly, swaying like he was about to fall. His dad reached out to steady him, but it was too late. Liam collapsed onto the ground with a loud thud. Chaos erupted. His mom screamed, guests jumped to their feet, and the officiant looked completely lost. Samantha threw up her hands and groaned, "Oh, for God's sake, what now?" Liam's parents were frantic, shouting for someone to call 911. They recognized the signs of his allergy immediately and started asking if he'd eaten anything unusual. His mom yelled, "Did someone serve him animal products? He's allergic. Who gave him non-vegan food?" All eyes turned to Samantha. At first, she played dumb. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, folding her arms defensively. "He asked for vegan food, and I made sure he got it. Maybe he's just overreacting like always." Liam's mom wasn't buying it. "Samantha," she said, her voice trembling with anger. "He only gets this reaction when he's been exposed to something he's allergic to. What did you serve him?" That's when Samantha snapped. She threw her bouquet onto the ground and blurted out, "Fine. You want the truth? I gave him regular food, okay? I thought all this vegan crap was just in his head and I wanted to prove a point." You could hear a pin drop. Then, all hell broke loose. Liam's dad lunged toward Samantha, but someone held him back. His mom was sobbing uncontrollably, yelling, "How could you do this? Do you realize what you've done?" Guests were murmuring, some filming the scene on their phones, while others tried to help Liam, who was barely conscious at this point. Samantha tried to justify herself. "He's been faking it for years. I thought maybe if he ate real food, he'd realize he's fine. I didn't think he'd actually get sick." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Samantha," I said, my voice shaking with anger, "you lied to him. You put his life at risk on purpose. What the hell is wrong with you?" She glared at me, tears streaming down her face. "I did it for us. I didn't want him ruining our wedding with his stupid diet drama." Before I could respond, the paramedics arrived. They rushed Liam to the hospital, and his parents went with him. The ceremony, of course, was over. Samantha stood there, shaking, as our friends and family stared at her in horror. Little did she know, this was only the beginning of her nightmare. When we got to the hospital, the emergency room was chaos. Liam's parents were hysterical, pleading with the doctors to do something, while the rest of us waited in stunned silence. Samantha and I sat on opposite ends of the waiting room. She was still wearing her wedding dress, the hem stained from where she'd knelt on the ground at the venue. Her makeup was smeared, and her expression was a mix of defiance and fear. I couldn't even look at her. Hours passed. Every time a doctor walked through the doors, Liam's parents would jump up, only to be told they'd have to wait a little longer. Finally, the doctor emerged, his face grim. He motioned for Liam's parents, and I followed behind, unable to stop myself. Samantha tried to join us, but Liam's dad shot her a look so venomous she froze in place. The doctor explained that Liam had gone into anaphylactic shock. They'd managed to stabilize him, but the reaction had caused severe damage to his intestines and digestive system. "We're looking at permanent consequences here," he said, his tone heavy. "He'll likely develop a chronic condition, and eating will never be the same for him. He'll need specialized care and treatment, which will cost upwards of $500,000 over the next few years." Liam's mom broke down, clutching her husband's arm, while his dad just stood there, seething. I could feel my heart sinking with every word. Samantha had done this. She had ruined an innocent man's life over some ridiculous notion that veganism was propaganda. When we returned to the waiting room, Samantha was still sitting there, her hands clenched in her lap. She looked up at me with tear-filled eyes and whispered, "Is he okay?" "Define okay," I snapped. "He's alive, but his life is never going to be the same. He's going to need treatment for the rest of his life, and his parents are looking at $500,000 in medical bills. What the hell were you thinking?" That's when the fight erupted. Samantha jumped to her feet, her voice rising as she tried to defend herself. "I didn't know this would happen. I thought he was exaggerating like he always does. I didn't mean to hurt him." "You didn't mean to hurt him?" I shouted back. "You lied to him, Samantha. You deliberately gave him something you knew he couldn't have, all because you wanted to prove a point. Do you even hear yourself right now?" By now, other people in the waiting room were staring at us. Samantha dropped to her knees, tears streaming down her face. "Please, don't do this. I love you. I was trying to make our wedding perfect. I didn't want him ruining it with his stupid drama." I stared at her, disgusted. "You call nearly killing someone stupid drama? You've always hated Liam, and now you've destroyed his life. And for what? So you could have one moment where you felt superior? I can't do this anymore, Samantha. We're done." She clutched at the hem of my suit, sobbing. "Please, don't leave me. We can fix this. I'll apologize. I'll pay for his treatment, whatever it takes. Just don't throw us away." But I couldn't look at her anymore. "It's already gone, Samantha. You did this. You ruined everything." I walked out, leaving her kneeling there in her wedding dress, surrounded by strangers who whispered and shook their heads in pity and judgment. The days that followed were some of the hardest of my life. I'd loved Samantha. Despite all her flaws, I'd believed we could build a future together. But now, every time I thought about her, all I could feel was anger and betrayal. My friends and family tried to support me, but nothing could shake the hollow ache in my chest. Samantha didn't make things any easier. She called me nonstop, leaving voicemails full of apologies and tearful pleas. Her family reached out too, trying to mediate, but I refused to speak to any of them. I needed space, and every reminder of her just reopened the wound. For a while, she and her family backed off. I thought she'd finally accepted that it was over. But then, a few weeks later, Liam was released from the hospital. He was still weak, but he was alive. That's when Samantha decided to make her move. She showed up at my parents' house, uninvited and unwelcome, with a bouquet of flowers and a handwritten letter. "Liam's fine now," she said, her voice trembling. "I know I made a mistake, but I've learned from it. We can move past this. Let's reschedule the wedding and start over." I wanted to scream. Instead, I just stared at her, trying to process the sheer audacity of her words. "Liam's fine?" I repeated, my voice cold. "Do you even hear yourself?" "He's not fine, Samantha. He's going to be dealing with this for the rest of his life. And you think we can just pick up where we left off?" She started to cry again, reaching for my hand. "I love you. I'll never do anything like this again. Please just give me another chance." For a split second, I almost caved. Despite everything, a part of me still loved her. But then I remembered Liam lying unconscious on the floor, his parents screaming for help, and the doctor's words about permanent damage. "No," I said firmly, pulling my hand away. "This is over. You need to leave." She left, sobbing, but that wasn't the end of it. A few days later, Liam's parents filed a police complaint against Samantha for attempted murder. The trial was a media circus. Samantha pleaded innocent, claiming she'd only wanted to help Liam see the error of his ways. Her lawyer argued that it wasn't premeditated, but the evidence was damning. The jury didn't buy her excuses. She was sentenced to 5 years in prison and ordered to pay Liam's medical expenses in full. Now, here I am, months later, trying to piece my life back together. I still can't believe how everything turned out. The woman I thought I'd spend my life with is now behind bars, and the happiest day of our lives became the absolute worst nightmare. Every time I think about Samantha, I feel a mix of emotions: anger, sadness, and disbelief. How could someone I loved so deeply do something so horrible? How could she destroy not just her own life, but mine, Liam's, and countless others? I don't know if I'll ever find closure, but one thing's for sure. I'll never forget the day my dreams shattered, leaving nothing but ashes behind.